Hello everyone, welcome back to Practical UX. Here we focus on design, UX, research, and all the things that make you a more practical, more powerful UX designer. I am Dr. Chris Parker, and today we're talking about some of the latest research developments. Now, UX is constantly evolving. So go back a few years ago, we were thinking about, where do we place the buy now button? But now we're thinking beyond that. We're thinking about trust, we're thinking about empathy, and the full range of relationship between technology and people. In fact, in my academic life, most of my research has been about that feeling inside, that element of trust that you think, I love this stuff. So I'm going to be bringing you insights into this week. So I've been looking through some of the research published over the last week, and these are 5 papers that stood out to me and I thought, these are really interesting and I'd like to share them with you. As always, I'm going to link them down below in the show notes, so if you want to read about them further, go for it. Or if you want to reach out to me, my email's down there as well. I'd love to have a conversation with you. So we're going to be covering AI systems that explain the choices, virtual worlds that connect people and our hearts. We're thinking about that. Folding phones, is that really a great experience? And we're going to think about cars that communicate after a crash and the challenge of bringing great experiences to this. So it's a lot to cover. We're going to take it step by step. Here we go. To start off, we're going to be thinking about trusting the machine. So we're going to start with something that seems a bit small, but actually matters a lot, which is trust. Now, this is not the kind of trust you get from your barista after going to the coffee shop a few times or your local bar or your Bible, but it's the kind that forms between a person and the machine. So we're going back a little bit here for a paper from 2023, and it was published in Human-Computer Interactions by Benedikt Leichmann and colleagues at Johannes Kepler University Linz, and they were looking at this issue of trust head-on. And it's called The Effects of Explainable Artificial Intelligence in Trust and Human Behaviour in High-Risk Decision Tasks. Now, what made this stand out to me is that this experiment was a little bit unusual. We looked at participants who took part in virtual mushroom picking. Now, in this experiment, their job was to decide which mushrooms were edible and which were poisonous using an AI-powered classification app. Now, half of the people got the answers completely simple, like yes, it's safe to eat, and no, you don't. The other half of the people got a visual heat map explaining why the AI made the decision. So it's more about probability rather than a yes, no. And as we know, probability is a gradient, it's a range. The group that received explanations outperformed the group which did not, and that showed a better calibrated trust levels. So having the AI explain to you is more important in forming trust than just giving yes or no, even when the outcome is the same. Now, this idea of better calibrated trust is super important. The goal is not making people trust automation without question. It's about building the right kind of trust. Users shouldn't just trust a system too much because if it might go wrong, it's not particularly really good. You need a little bit of skepticism in there and it might fall down. So what I read the paper, I thought about all the apps that we use every day that explain us and they expect us to just trust them right away. When we search online through a search engine, we have trust that the results it's giving is the right one. When we use Facebook or X or whatever social media platform we have, we expect that the news we get and the information we get is true. So we have trust in these systems, and we have health trackers and they say, you're doing the right thing or you're not, or the workouts. When we use AI to help us write, I use Grammarly all the time, and we have faith, we have trust that these things are given to us in the right way. But we got to think, how often do we actually understand why they tell us what they tell us? Now, Leichmann's team didn't just stop at measuring accuracy, they also tried an educational approach. So they were thinking about teaching some participants a bit about AI before the experiment. Now, surprisingly, that did not make much difference. So the way the interface was designed especially with small visual explanations, made a bigger difference than what people already knew. So, reading from the paper, one quote which sticks out is, "Contrary to our expectations, the educational intervention, domain-specific knowledge, and AI knowledge had no effect on performance." So, put that simply, you can't just teach by explaining things. You can't teach trust by explaining it. You have to design it into how people use the system. So what does that mean? Well, when a system explains its reasoning visually with things like, you've got these attribution maps like they used in the experiment, or explain the context, it helps users understand how AI works. And that changes how people use it. So think about applying this in the real world. If you've got some kind of medical diagnosis app and you're thinking about which parts of the X-ray influences the suggestions, so look at this, that's really big. If you've got a financial tool that shows data sources behind its investment recommendation, that's going to be really big because we're going to say, oh, look, this recommendation comes from Reddit. Okay, that's rubbish, or this recommendation comes from whichever investment or source. You're going to have that preconception coming in. That's going to influence you and build trust. Imagine thinking about self-driving cars. If they were to visualize what it sees on the road in some realistic way, that's going to create levels of trust. So rather than just getting into a car and it going, oh, trust me, I know what's around, I've got these things, I know where the dangers are. Well, actually, if you could maybe visualize this in a way, maybe have lights around the inside of the car that would change color based on where it sees danger, so it's communicating what it's estimating. So that's really an interesting, different way of thinking about trust. And because most of the time when you see apps, you're going to be thinking simple yes, no, good, bad. I see a bit of this coming up in research and PhDs I supervise. But we need to think different. The visual aspect is something that hasn't really worked on, and we could be doing a lot of work with this. So when you think about talking to someone, you think, well, people might say we don't need to trust AI because we don't negotiate with it. We don't have an influence, so why do we trust? Well, not really. Trust is critical. If people trust the system, they work with it, and they're going to base it on context seen. So we can think about metaphors for this, and it's like a UX mushroom problem. Now, sometimes people have to make important decisions without enough experience, and we do this all the time. So you got to think, are designers the mycelium under the surface? We're connecting people and creating actions. So when the system communicates well, people follow instructions. But that's more than that. They also learn. So the communication, which is the mycelium under the structure, is just like what we do. We communicate, we create things. So when you think about the conclusion of this paper, humans must understand how AI arrives at a particular decision and how to be able to evaluate whether a decision is reasonable or not. That is really, really critical. The human has to make a decision. When we make a decision, if it's reasonable, we can start to learn to trust. It's not just a case of yes, no, it's more about that. There's a lot more nuance going on in crafting the trust for people. This is quite important because this idea could start to guide responsible design. So think about what's important to you. If you're designing a system that uses AI, whether it's a chatbot, some kind of diagnosis dashboard, you need to make explainability a key feature, explaining why it's doing this, what data sources. This shouldn't be just hidden behind an info box. It needs to be right up there, front and foremost. Make the sources, make the explanation visible, make it an interactive part of the experience, and it'd be a powerful way to create a more trustworthy AI. So think about a few takeaways for this. Show evidence. Let users see why. You need to visualize this. Now show when the AI is not sure. I mean, maybe having an AI going, this is like a 50-50 guess, rather than going, yes. That transparency will breed trust in the user. And this, you can also think about inviting curiosity. Now, maybe if you could make these explanations tappable, you can go into them, you can explore them. That interaction could form further trust. And you can maybe take it further and think about design for collaboration. So rather than just thinking about persuading, your goal isn't to make users trust more, it's to help them trust accuracy. So the future of AI isn't just about who has the smartest model, it could be about who builds the most trustworthy relationships. Now I move on to part 2, in sync, body language of virtual reality. Picture this. You put on a VR headset, the lights dim. Now you're in a virtual concert hall, surrounded by avatars playing music pulsing through you. You look around and realize that even from far away, you and your friends are moving together. You're not just dancing, your heartbeats are aligning. Now that's not science fiction or science fantasy. That's exactly what a recent study in 2025 from Aalto University and UC Santa Cruz explored in the paper, It's Always Better When We're Together. Sociology, synchrony, and shared experience in social VR. Now, this is quite surprising. The researchers, Agnes Mercedes-Kloft and her team, wanted to find out if our bodies sync up in virtual reality with shared experiences the way we do in real concerts. Now, when you go to a real live concert, you are having this great communal experience with the music and the light. It's I think, to me, the closest thing to religious experience. So I've never experienced that in virtual reality, and the idea that this could be brought into the virtual world, that religious embodiment into the virtual world, is really exciting. So here's how they tested it. They got 66 participants and paired them up and had them watch music videos in virtual reality under 4 different conditions. 1 was alone, so no social cues. The 2 was with voice-only cues. Number 3 was with avatar-only cues. And number 4 was with both avatar and voice together. So they measured the electrodermal activity, heart rate, and respiration. So these are getting real physiological data, while also asking about how connected, present, and emotionally engaged people felt. So a really great mixed method study. So what were the results? Now they found that attending the experience with access to social cues, particularly in the avatar and voice condition, which is condition number 4, significantly strengthened physiological synchrony, presence dimensions, social connectedness, and user experience. So when people can see and hear each other in virtual reality, their body signals, their measurements of their body, their activity in their brain, the electrodermal activity, their heart rate, their respiration, all that body data lined up. Their hearts beat in rhythm. Their skin conductivity changed together. Now, you know that feeling when you're watching a movie with someone and maybe you both gasp at the same time, or you're in the cinema and it's a horror film, you just jump at the same time, or maybe you're watching comedy and you laugh because the other person does. Now, that is synchrony. It's empathy you can measure, and now, apparently, it exists in virtual reality too. We are still the same humans in that virtual world. What this study gives us is more than interesting data. It gives us a new way to measure shared experiences in the digital environments. The paper calls this physiological synchrony and describes it as the alignment of physiological signals such as electrodermal activity, heart rate, and respiratory rate between people. So it's like the signals exist in the world like Wi-Fi, like emotional Wi-Fi. It's invisible, it's real-time, and it's utterly human. Now, that is a huge shift from a UX perspective, because it means we can start to evaluate social presence not just through surveys and questions, but through the body itself. Physiological synchrony can serve as a measure of great co-experience in social VR music settings. So think about it. As people, as designers, we've been obsessed with making virtual reality look more real, having higher presence. And we've been doing this through higher frame rates, better lighting, having better textures. But this new paper suggests that we should ask a different question. How can VR make us feel more together? Now, when I first read this paper, I just took a moment to pause. Now, in UX, we often talk about empathy, the most important thing we do on this show. And we think about understanding users' emotions and think, what if the technology could detect us? What if it could measure us and react to us? This is a really interesting decision. It's been around for a long time. It's great to see the research catching up. So imagine if we had a virtual reality classroom where you've got the lecturer or the teacher's voice adjusts when engaging with students. So when student engagement drops, the volume, the voice, the way we communicate changes to engage with the students better. Maybe you think about a virtual reality concert that changes the lighting when the audience heartbeats rise. Now, think about this as like a back and forth synchronous between the computer and the user. We're having music, we're having lights, we're having sound, all coming together. And as our feelings are reaching that crescendo, the lighting's becoming there. So it's a combination of the lighting's causing it, the people are causing it. It's a synchronistic experience. That would be incredibly powerful. A few years ago, I saw the magician Dan Brown doing a show, I think it was called Messiah, and it was about this very thing. It was him creating that religious experience, the audience, through lighting, through sound, and getting people to really feel like he had powers. So we can do really amazing things. So you might be thinking, okay, cool. How can we design with something? This is quite a nice idea. What can we do? Now, we can think about designing for cues, not just visuals. The avatar and voice condition work the best out of all of them. So we know that people need more than just visuals. No, more than the seeing. We need the sound, we need the motion, we need the gesture, we need all this working together. We need co-present feedback in VR. Now, you've got subtle signals, like the way that avatars are breathing or syncing with lights, and that could really enhance the way that the group flows. We need to measure engagement with empathy. So, if physiological synchrony increases when connection deepens, UX researchers could use this as a real-time evaluation metric. We already have some of this, but we think we can do a lot more as UX designers. So, it's a design direction that moves UX away from the screens and the pixels and further into the emotional, physiological territory. Now, I'm going to leave you with the last quote from the author. As they said, "Our findings show its potential for evaluating, designing embodied interaction in extended reality, contributing to the optimization of presence, social connectedness, and user experience." So that's a really heartening thing to think about. We can create more emotionally rewarding experiences when we have people together in virtual reality. Hey, we've just talked about synchronicity of heartbeats in VR. Let's go to our third paper, which I've selected for you. We're going to talk about something very close to my heart, very close to my youth, folding phones. Now, our third stop is something that you can hold in your hands. Its implications, however, stretch way beyond the hardware. In their paper, Unfolding the User Experience, a comprehensive UX framework for foldable smartphones, published in the International Journal of Industrial Engineering this year, 2025, researchers Yang-Quin Liu, Lili Dong, and P. Patrick Ray from Tsinghua University in China dive deeply into how people experience foldable phones. Now, at first, it's easy to see foldable phones as just another hardware trend. We had it in the 2000s, it's back now. But yeah, this study looks at foldability as a new interaction method. So we need a different framework for how we work as UX designers. So here's the idea. Foldable smartphones represent a new category of mobile computing devices, combining tablet productivity with smartphone portability. So far, so familiar. Now, what's really interesting is how they structure user experiences. The researchers identified 3 core elements that define UX for foldable phones. There's the hinge, so there's the mechanical element and tactile center of the experience. There's the user, the ergonomics, the comfort, the psychological acceptance. And then there is the folding state interface, so how the digital experience adapts to the physical state change. Think about it this way. The hinge is a real piece of metal and plastic, and it really becomes an anchor for how we feel about the device. It affects how we trust the device, how we feel, maybe even how proud we are. Now that's just might be sounding a bit hyperbolic, but it really does, because this one small factor of the design changes how we feel about the whole phone as a piece. Now, as Leo and their colleagues described in the paper, the hinge has a crucial role in maintaining screen continuity, enhancing portability, and ensuring user comfort during the fold operation. Now, that's not just engineering, that's talking about experiences, that's talking about our area in UX. Now, the researchers even ran a very exciting case study comparing users with different hand sizes, so the ergonomics of this. And as listeners to the show know, ergonomics is something which we love to go into alongside UX. They found that hand size affected the pressure and fatigue levels, changing the comforts of the hinge and how it felt to operate. Now, that's a really big insight for UX. So small physical differences in hands can change the whole emotional experience. So they concluded that ergonomic capability and psychological acceptance are essential user factors in this part of the phone, this folding phone. So why should this really matter to the design of smartphones? After all, we're designing a smartphone app, we're designing for all platforms. Samsung want to put a hinge on it, have at it. Well, you could think about the hinge metaphorically for the multiple states. It's got multiple mode of user experiences and how we design from it. We have hybrid laptops, we have hybrid interfaces, we have flexible wearables. Now we think about flexible UX for phones. So literally it's a metaphor for the hinge. Now, not just designing static interfaces more. In the future, we can be designing more about transformations. Now, I remember when I was a teenager, be able to hold these folding phones all the time. I had a few. They were amazing. And there was this feeling about when you click the phone closed. It was really satisfying. I remember watching The Matrix, and someone at school had that banana phone where you press a button and the bottom slides out, and that clicking sound, like, wow, it made everyone want it. It wasn't just the look of it, it was the whole feel, the tactile experience. And that nostalgia it creates in me, that's a real human experience. When you think about these modern phones, I've seen them, I've played them, you get a similar kind of click, and they go, yeah, that's really great. Bringing that nostalgia back, which is a great experience. But when you open the phone, you look at it, there's this crease in the middle. And that really creates something inside me. I just feel I don't trust this. I don't like this. I don't want this near me. It feels somehow wrong, almost like it's broken. So this is a real interesting item that we could really work with this in new ways. So we've got to balance technological UX of unique product-specific features with general things like usability and aesthetics. So foldable phones really bring a new UX variables that we haven't really measured much before. There's things like hinge stiffness, how much the effect takes to unfold, and the sound they make when closing. These are all incredibly important parts of the physical UX away from the screens. And we've got to think about how these micro interactions are cues for quality and care. So less about the software, more about that physical design area. We want people to have a great experience opening and closing their phone and have great quality experience. So in their paper, their framework provides a foundation for future development of foldable smartphones, aiming to improve product attractiveness and systematically addressing user requirements and experiences. So don't just make things thin, don't just make it fast, make it feel right. And this is a real core element of design. It's not just about I did it, it's I did it well. And these authors produce a fantastic framework about how to do it right. Now, as designers, as UX designers, we often separate the hardware and software worlds, but Foldable reminds us that users never really do. They experience the device as a whole togetherness. We can't just have good software, we've got to have great hardware. So if you're working on a product that moves and bends and adapts, this research can really give you some very strong cues. So think about states, not just screens. So every fold, every tilt, every rotation, that's an opportunity for UX moment. Make sure that the hardware is giving the great experience in those physical changes. That means we've got to think about mechanics as emotional touch points. You've got to feel that hinge. You've got to feel the weight of the lid. When it click, when it closes, those sensory elements, they can create great trust. And we've got to design transitions a bit like we design stories. So when someone unfolds the phone, we're not just thinking about opening a device, you think about opening a great experience. So this is the first interaction, the first touch point. What's it lead on to next? And this might be where UX is really heading in the future. I remember there was a conversation a few years ago, someone saying that the smartphone interface, smartphone design is dead because we're now just into these sort of black rectangles that do the same thing and the physical design doesn't really change. And the response to that was, well, obviously you don't know very much about product design. This foldable creates this new paradigm for product design, and we can really go into this further. It creates new opportunities to create experiences. I strongly recommend that everyone looks into this paper and applies it in their research. So we are always moving between states, we're always moving between areas for abstraction, and the best experience is meeting those expectations, meeting the experiences, creating something really fantastic. Okay, so far we've learned about trusting machines, syncing with strangers, and folding on devices. And this is all helping to create better experiences. Next, we're looking at what happens when things go wrong. So there's a crash, a shock, a moment when UX stops being about convenience, starts being about survival. So stay with me. We're going to talk about post-crash UX and the psychology of designing for fear, trust, and recovery. Our fourth section talks about designing for impact, UX in the moments after the crash. Now, picture this. You're driving home after a long day. The roads are wet, the lights are low, and your playlist is playing quietly. Suddenly, there's a loud thud. The car jerks forward, airbags deployed, and your chest is pounding, and everything is slowed down. Now what? In that moment, your adrenaline is high, and it is hard to think clearly. Design becomes absolutely critical in these moments in disasters. This is where our fourth study comes in. Post-crash UX, an empirical study on multi-mode interfaces for immediate driver response by Yuanju Cho and their colleagues at Hyundai Motor Company and Puyang National University. They presented at the 2025 Automotive UI Adjunct Conference. So this is breaking research. Most automotive research focuses on preventing crashes. So you think about collision warnings, you think about lane departures and automated braking. In fact, lots of the vehicle UX research happening at Loughborough University focuses on exactly this thing. But this study asks a different question. What happens after an accident when the crash has already happened and the driver is unable to respond? In the author's words, while most previous work focuses on the moments before a crash, much less attention has been paid to the post-crash context, particularly how drivers handle minor accidents when they retrain the ability to respond autonomously. Their mission was simple. Design interfaces that support drivers during the immediate aftermath when the cognitive overload is high, motor control is shaky, and every decision counts. They tested two kinds of interface. There's the wizard-style UI, which provides that step-by-step guidance. So check for injury, turn off the ignition, turn on the hazard lights. And they also tested a chat-style AI assistant, so that conversational, adaptive, designed to sound close to a human and calm people down. So they went out and they recruited 25 drivers. Some of them had many use experiences, some of them had recently passed their tests, and they ran them through simulated crash scenarios. And their findings were pretty amazing. New drivers, novice drivers, they preferred the wizard UI that provided simple procedural tasks in a comforting way. Yet experienced drivers, they preferred the chat UI, faster, more flexible, more autonomous. Now, crucially, participants who had actually been in a real crash preferred to use a mobile phone rather than the car's built-in display. Now, why? Why is this? Because they trusted their phone more in a crisis. Now, this insight highlights a really important point. Trust can shift depending on the situation. When people are stressed, they tend to use what feels familiar and controllable, even if it is not the most efficient option. As the author said, all participants with crash experience favoured mobile devices, highlighting the impact of the context of the crash experience and acceptance of technology. Now that sounds something really quite incredible to me. It really stood out. We often assume that good UX is about smooth and automated experiences, but in a stressful situation, people prefer what they know. And this really does challenge how designers can think about emotional resilience. Designing interfaces for these moments means supporting the users with information and emotional stability. Now, thinking practically, if you're building a system for a high-stress context, it could be healthcare care, could be emergency response, could be cybersecurity. This study offers a simple but powerful principle. In moments of fear, designed for clarity and comfort, not cleverness. When people are afraid, they need clear guidance and reassurance, not advanced features. So I really love this quote from the paper. Given the psychological stress following a crash, researchers argue that post-accident systems should go beyond static information and provide adaptive supported interactions, acting as emotionally considerate decision support tools. The idea of emotionally considerate design is absolutely critical for UX professionals to remember. So here's 3 key takeaways from Cho and colleague study that I think everyone listening to this podcast can use. Design for users under stress. When attention is limited and thinking is slower, interfaces should be very clear and very easy to use. Rely on familiar tools. So in a crisis, users will prefer what they know. Integrate your personal device or familiar concepts rather than introducing new ones. Remember, few people get in accidents. And when you get that wizard interface, it's the first time people have seen it. Of course it's going to be difficult. Bring in familiarity. And third, provide adaptive and empathic feedback. The way information is delivered is as important as the context itself. So you can imagine designing a hospital dashboard and people going, oh, when alarms go off, my brain stops reading text. I just see colours and tones. We've all been in that situation. When something is difficult, you might be at work and something's gone wrong. You don't understand the words. You just see that visceral information. This idea applies here. You're in a chaotic situation. Your design has to communicate as clearly as words. Even better, if your design doesn't even need words and it works effectively. UX is not all about usability. It's also about supporting people in times of stress. So when designing for unusual situations, remember that these moments are important for building trust. When things are going well, designers often go unnoticed. In difficult moments, good design provides stability. With that, we now enter our final study, which is also the most challenging. This one doesn't just ask us to redesign an interface, it asks us to redesign our entire discipline. It's called Stop Doing User Experience, Start Doing Relation Artefact Design by Torkel Clemensen from Copenhagen Business School, published in Interaction with Computers this year in 2025. The title itself is quite challenging and it changes how we think about what design is. So here's Clement's thesis in one line. HCI researchers and professionals must stop designing artifacts that people look at all the time and start instead designing artifacts that make people look at each other. This is a significant shift in perspective. For decades, UX has been about engagement, keeping people glued to devices, absorbed in experiences, satisfied by interfaces. But this paper says, what if that is the problem? We have created tools that capture attention so well that they are distracting people. Devices are meant to make lives easier, but they can also make it harder and disconnect us from each other. Clement calls this alternative approach Relation Artefact Design, or RAD for short. Instead of designing for user experience, RAD designs for human connection. He gives a really interesting example of something very commonplace to many of us, the wedding ring. Wedding rings are strong examples of relation design artifact designs. Artifacts that show humans shared a desire to make love visible to others. It is a simple object, but its purpose is to represent a whole relationship. It does not entertain, does not inform, doesn't alert. It serves as a constant reminder of belonging. Now, let's contrast this with something very close, a smartwatch. Clemens argues that although things like the Galaxy Smart Ring appear relational, it actually serves a different purpose. He calls this relational artifact, an object that encourages interaction with itself rather than with other people. So he writes, things like the Galaxy Smart Ring is designed to relate to its user by quantifying its user and makes its user look at its numbers with a high and consistent frequency. The same can be said about smartwatches. They are designed to push back to us. Now, I check my phone screen time stats and some days it's 5 hours. Now, I teach design for a living. So even someone like myself who is engrossed in this, now I fall into this trap. I fall into this. Now, the main argument is that UX may have become too effective at making people attach to their devices. So the goal should be to encourage a stronger connection between people, not just connection to devices. Clemenson calls for new research and design principles for artifacts that disengage rather than capture. And this means devices that encourage you to look up and talk, not just scroll. Tools that fade out of the way once they've served their purpose, and apps that measure time away from the screen as a metric of success. Now, he writes that the future of human-centered design, HC, it might call for less UX design and more RAD. Now, this approach is not against UX design, it's really evolving it. It kind of reminds me of Don Norman's Design for Everyday Things, where he said, the best design's invisible. RAD takes that further. The best design makes other people visible. Now, years ago, when Nintendo were launching the Nintendo Switch, they talked about this, and they talked about how when you are playing with a deck of cards, you have your cards in front of you, but you're looking at the other person. It's an interaction with another person, not just the artifact, the cards. And they said, this is our inspiration for the kind of interactivity we want with the Switch. Now, that sounds great. It sounds just like we've got here, but Nintendo never really achieved it. There's still a huge eye to the screen. And people get addicted to just this handheld screen device. It didn't create that great connection like they promised. So this might seem familiar. It might seem like we've heard it before, but this is a new way and it's a new call. So we should reconsider the broader implications for design. Think about answering more challenging questions. So what if a success metric is measured in connection, not in clicks? Now, what if the next UX project wasn't about delight, but about disengagement, helping users step away feeling fulfilled rather than constantly being hooked? What if instead of optimizing attention, we optimize presence? We optimize the flow of people feeling. So this paper made me reconsider my own views in some way. Like, I'm someone that loves technology. I'm doing a technology podcast right now. I love clever interfaces with elegant design, the kind of design that makes you discover and go, wow. But when I think about my happiest moments, none of them are involving a screen. When I think in my memory, I don't think a screen was anywhere involved in any way. They involve the other person. They share a connection with the other person and creating togetherness. So Clement's argument may be the type of challenge the field really needs, that progress in UX often comes from asking difficult questions. So do we design for efficiency or for emotion? Do we design for attention or for intention? Do we design for engagement or empathy? So now, maybe we need to disconnect more. Okay, there we are. 5 studies, 5 different views of where UX might be heading. So to recap, we learnt about Leishman's team that about explainable AI isn't just about transparency, it's about trust and the trust we have and calibration. From Cloft, we just think about the social VR and how that can literally sync our bodies into rhythm. From Neo's framework, they remind us that foldable devices, things like the hinge, it's not just a mechanism, but it's a vehicle to create emotion and ergonomics. From Cho's research, it taught us about the post-UX crash experience, and that it's about design for human resilience, clarity and chaos, clarity in the moments of chaos. And Clement's manifesto dared us to stop doing UX altogether and dared us to start designing for humans and connection. Each of these papers had at its heart one truth: UX is continually an evolving subject, from usability to understanding, from interaction to intention, from engagement to empathy. So listeners, here's your challenge. The next time you're designing something, ask not just, will this delight designers, but also think about, will this connect people? That's the kind of experience that would truly last. Now, I've been Dr. Chris Parker. This was the Practical UX podcast. I hope you found today's episode inspiring. So please share it with your friends, share it with your colleagues, and please leave a review. It really helps the show grow and helps me being here, sharing research, sharing insights, sharing case studies with you to help you become a more powerful UX designer, because the greatest UX moments are between all of us. Thank you. Good night.